Incredible there. Iraqi officials have ordered 250 Blackwater security guards to leave the country within a week. The Interior Ministry says both current and former employees of the firm were told of their expulsion a few days ago. This comes after a U.S. judge dismissed the manslaughter charges against 5 members of the company in connection with the killing of 17 Iraqi civilians in 2007. Blackwater, which is now called Z Services, was one of 3 private security contractors hired to protect diplomats in Iraq. For more on the Blackwater Guards expulsion, we're joined now by Yasmin Khan from the campaign group War on Want. She joins us live from London. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, your group's worked on trying to get private security better regulated. How significant do you think is Iraq's decision to expel these Blackwater Guards?
Well, I think it's an extremely significant decision that took place today and really demonstrates the negative impact and destabilising force that these companies have. What we saw in Iraq was during the US and UK-led occupation, private military companies running riot and committing hundreds of human rights abuses. And I think, the fact that here we are, almost 3 years later, and the Blackwater, the contractors working for Blackwater having been let off the hook in the US and the Iraqis now taking action, just shows the kind of impact that they have and why now, when the US is sending more troops to Afghanistan and more companies like Blackwater are likely to be used, it's important to have these companies regulated now more than ever.
Now, these private security guards were heavily armed and they were foreigners and they weren't invited by the Iraqi government. How do you think they were able to get away with carrying such heavy weaponry?
Well, the coalition forces during the occupation of Iraq relied heavily on these private armies, these corporate mercenaries, to carry out their occupation and military activities. And I think what's very interesting is to look at what's happening now in comparison in Afghanistan, where the same company, Blackwater, now under its new name as Z, as you said, is up for a £1 billion contract with the US military in Afghanistan. So these very same human rights abuses that we saw taking place in Iraq are very likely to take place in Afghanistan as well.
And as you had just touched on, speculation is mounting that Blackwater could be overstepping its mark by helping CIA operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. What are your concerns there?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's really, really concerning. Just last month there were reports that Blackwater, one of its subsidiaries, were operating on behalf of the US on the Pakistan border. We know that they are playing a destabilising force in Afghanistan. Last year, there were human rights abuses by the firm, very similar to the Nusra Square shooting in Iraq. So I think, this company has stood out, I think, as really one of the most the largest and one most explicit in human rights abuses. But there are hundreds of thousands of contractors, and Blackwater is one of many companies that needs to be regulated. And I think today's decision by the Iraqi authorities just shows how pressing a demand it is, and how the Iraqi victims of the Nusra Square shooting are never going to stop fighting for justice.
And in terms of that justice, the Iraqi parliament says it will pass new laws to allow foreign contract workers to be prosecuted in Iraqi courts. Do you think that's a move that could help rein in these organizations?
Well, I mean, I think the Iraqi government has taken some, really strident steps to try and get these companies prosecuted. I mean, we can only be hopeful that these can kind of lead to something. But actually, I think it's much more important to look at why are these companies being used. I mean, we're looking at a stage now where all around the world, governments are increasingly relying on private armies to fight increasingly unpopular wars. And organisations such as War on Want are really highlighting this as a drive towards the privatisation of war, and really citizens' control over the war machine, democratic control over soldiers and armies is being eroded by an increased reliance on companies like Blackwater.
Thank you very much for joining us with that analysis. Yasmin Khan from the War on Want organization.